Okay, roll call. Sonora.
Sure. Member Hawkins?
Here.
Member Mirabenta?
Here.
Member Lambert?
Here.
Member Randall indicated he would not be present tonight. At your last meeting, you confirmed that by email to myself. Member Peacock?
Here.
Member Wright?
Here.
And Member Such?
Here.
So that's one.
I'm sitting in for Raj.
The council decided that the membership was made up of the designated
Oh,
committee
okay.
members,
All right.
not alternates.
Okay, so should I leave?
We have quite a lot of stuff there.
Well, no, it's fine. I decided I
No,
won't present the count if that's.
Well, he was going to do that at a separate meeting.
Next meeting. Okay, because he told me I was to do it tonight. So I should leave things.
We were understanding that was going to be a separate meeting.
Oh.
However, since you work so closely with Raj, I don't have any problem with you sitting, but there may be a portion where it's just the task force doing discussion.
Okay.
And that would not include you because you're not an alternate.
Let me know.
Okay. Report on the posting of agenda.
At 2 o'clock on the 25th of October.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Any additions, corrections, subtractions? Notification of division? Okay. Public forum. The public may address the task force on any item of public interest not otherwise on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the task force. No action may be taken at the time. Matters to be addressed may be referred to city staff or placed on a subsequent meeting agenda. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation. Is there anyone that wants to speak under the public forum portion? Seeing none, we'll go to item E, that's unfinished business. There is none. Item F, new business. Number 1 is presentation by representatives of the Tuolumne County Human Services Agency. I see Ms. Connolly and Mr. Boyack are both.
Just trying to make sure this is already on. Can everyone hear me? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Ann Connolly. I'm the Tuolumne County Human Services Agency Director, and we've been asked to do a presentation on the various Human Services Agency programs. And we have both Steve Boyack, the Assistant Human Services Agency Director here. Steve will be talking about the behavioral health programs, and I will be discussing the social services programs. I think if the members have no issue with it, I'd like to start with Steve Boyack discussing the behavioral health programs. And I don't know if you would prefer any questions after each presentation, or if you want to wait till the presentation is finished.
Does it matter to the folks? And it's really kind of up to you guys whether you want to be interrupted or not.
Well, what we're thinking is if people could write their questions down, and then maybe after each presentation, if you have specific questions, so after Steve does his presentation, please feel free to make any comments or ask any questions on behavioral health, and after I do social services, I'm happy to do the same.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right then. So, no further ado, Steve Boyack.
Now that's an entrance. I like that. So, members of the task force, my name is Steve Boyack. I'm the Assistant Director for the Human Services Agency of Tuolumne County. Here to make a presentation tonight on behalf of behavioral health and the folks that work in behavioral health and the programs that they support on behalf of our citizens in Tuolumne County. So, BH, behavioral health became a county program in 2008. We currently have 66 full-time equivalents that work in our program, and we have a little over 90 if you include our relief staff. Behavioral health is an integrated mental health and alcohol drug service program, so they're combined. Behavioral health is both mental health and drug-related services together. So you might hear mental health once in a while. That is mental health. Behavioral health is both. All right. So the state's local mental health plan provider is behavioral health. We have a state contract with the Department of Health Care Services to provide mandated services here in Tuolumne County. And that contract is routinely updated, and we are routinely audited to ensure that we are meeting our state mandates. So BH must be at the most basic level, and I want to be clear here, that we provide managed care, crisis response, and medication services to the most vulnerable in our county. I'll come back to that. So Medi-Cal beneficiaries, uninsured individuals who meet specific medical necessity criteria can only access behavioral health services. So again, I want to go into this a little bit deeper. Mental health services are considered a specialty, and because it's a specialty and because it's a Medi-Cal program, there are specific requirements that only allow certain individuals to access our services at behavioral health. So if there's questions about why can't anyone come to behavioral health? Because we have the resources, the finance and personnel resources to focus on the most seriously mentally ill that meet medical criteria that are on Medi-Cal or indigent. Okay. Our staff consists of mental health counselors for crisis response, therapists for adult and children's services, psychiatric services, drug and alcohol counselors. We bill Medi-Cal out of our office at Behavioral Health. We manage our electronic filing records internal to Behavioral Health. We have medical reception staff, and last but not least, we have a few administrators. So what is behavioral health, what does the program look like as an overview? So we have crisis services. Crisis services are those services where we respond to those that are possibly in a mental health crisis. And most likely, we respond to those crises internal to behavioral health during daytime hours, and after hours, most likely at the emergency department at the hospital. So we deploy staff to manage those crises, and I want to be clear that when we respond to crisis, we respond to anyone in crisis. It doesn't matter what kind of insurance they carry or any insurance they carry. We will manage the crisis. That's the only difference in all of the rest of the programs that we implement. Plan services. So we have clinical, treatment, and medication services that we're required to provide for our citizens. We have substance use disorder services, and we also have something that is relatively new since 2004, Proposition 63 Mental Health Services Act programs that we implement. And I describe our MHSA program, Mental Health Services Act, as our proactive arm. It's our proactive arm where we have to provide services that are that go beyond our mandate. We can't supplant utilizing Mental Health Services Act funding. So there's services where we are actively out in the community engaging individuals in whatever circumstance. They have to be eligible to behavioral health, but we engage them in a circumstance to be able to provide services for them where they might not otherwise get services. And they may, at a time without services like this, touch other pieces or other units in behavioral health, such as crisis. If we're able to conduct proper outreach, wrap services around individuals using our MHSA program, chances are we might be able to engage before a decompensation and then having to react as opposed to proact. So what does our Mental Health Services Act programs look like? So I am going to focus, we have a myriad of Mental Health Services Act programs that we implement in Tuolumne County. My focus tonight is on those that impact homelessness. And I would encourage anyone to go to our website. We do have our MHSA plan on the website, and you can go take a look at the full array of services. So specific to homelessness, we have homelessness outreach and peer support programs. And I want to highlight those because those programs allow our staff and volunteer staff to engage either homelessness types of situations or scenarios, or engage behavioral health clients who are peers to our program to be able to provide services that would lend themselves to maintain recovery or provide for a circumstance that would allow for an individual to at least maintain some level of dignity, even if they're homeless. Those two locations, one is the Enrichment Center, it's on the Behavioral Health Campus, and the other is led by Jeanette Lambert, so it's the Lambert Drop-In Center downtown Sonora. These are programs that are funded through MHSA. And again, I will emphasize the Lambert Center is a volunteer-supported effort in conjunction with behavioral health. We have a full-service partnership program. That is also MHSA. That is where we have case managers that have a caseload, and we do that sort of outreach that I just described earlier. We have a benefits and resources specialist. It's critical. Someone's homeless, they're engaging in our services. We have an individual, her name is Linda, and she will sit down with folks and determine whether or not, or I shouldn't say whether or not, what available benefits or services can be provided for an individual. And we'll do that for anyone that engages us. Permanent supportive housing. That is a program that's funded through MHSA, and we have 2 supportive housing projects that we own right now. We have one in Jamestown, it's called Cabrini House. It houses 5 individuals. We also have one on South Washington Street. It's a 6-bedroom facility, and they work in conjunction with our full-service partnership program. And we also support the needs when we can with either apartments or, on occasion, even hotel rooms. So it just depends on what the various needs might be in the circumstance that we're trying to provide for. So that, in a nutshell, trying to keep it high level here, are the programs in behavioral health. Don't know if you have any questions about those, but I'd like to talk about a little bit about what we're up to now and some things we're paying attention to regarding homelessness in Tuolumne County.
Steve?
Yeah.
Yes, kind of made it
Sure.
right there, so I'm
Sure.
going to
Sure.
take the advantage of
Okay.
asking if anyone's got any questions of what Steve's presented so far. Colette?
I don't know how to turn this on.
That's right, it's already on.
That is?
I can hear it.
Okay. Do you have on your website stats of how many visits you make or how many clients you see?
You know,
on a monthly basis?
I
I'm just
can't,
curious.
we have the stats. I have them right here in this binder, and I can report them out to you if you wish, both for the Enrichment Center and for the Lambert Center, unduplicated counts. We keep them. I don't know that we post them.
So, and they include like crisis interventions a month?
We keep
I'm
track.
sure you have all those.
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And those can be, I mean, the public can have access to them?
I
I'm
will
just
look into
curious.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Question I have, when you mentioned the housing, I remember filming some years ago, a thing up in Mona Vista. Is that the housing thing that opened up, this was 10 years ago or more, or about 10 years ago, is that not related to, or is that
all right,
what Cabrini used to be?
Oh, okay, so Cabrini House is in Jamestown.
Right.
So a little bit of distance. We do have working operations in Mona Vista.
Mm-hmm.
We have our Hope House there, And Ann can speak more to the Hope House
Okay.
if you wish to know more about that. We have ambulance operations in Mona Vista.
I'm pretty sure it's the Hope House.
Yeah, and then we also have, there's a
The
fire
board- The board
department.
went up there
Okay.
for lunch.
You want to speak to it?
Well, I mean, I just wanted, I
Okay.
didn't know if that was part of the,
It's a different program.
okay, that's fine.
No, it's a different program.
Any other questions at this point? Kevin?
So what is the transition or the process for the 5150 if there's no holding places here anymore other than jail or emergency room?
So 5150, an entirely different set of circumstance. We respond to crisis. 5150 is a reference to section 5150 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. It is the piece of the law that allows us to go ahead and examine for criteria when someone is in crisis that's either a danger to themselves, others, or gravely disabled. And we, unfortunately, we respond quite frequently to the hospital, either to look at individuals for eligibility criteria for hospitalization, and whether or not we can intervene in some way before hospitalization occurs. And we have a walk-in operation at Behavioral Health, and during the day and until 9 o'clock in the evening, folks that are in crisis can walk in. We will try our best to serve their need at the location, but if their need is better well served at the hospital, being evaluated for 5150 criteria, then we will either work with law enforcement or the ambulance or some other means of transportation to get them to the emergency department, where we will look at all the eligibility standards for hospitalization if it's necessary. You mentioned how we might keep folks there when they're there. Is that what your question was?
Yes, because I understood some years ago when the grand jury was looking into this, if there was no certification or desire to be certified by the for the hospital to hold them there, there was a real urgent need to have them placed so that it didn't deplete their staff on the medical side, nor the law enforcement staff on their normal duty side, and it was kind of a void. And so I was just wondering how that has come along, or are there contracts involved now, or is a process in place now, kind of thing? Because that's a pretty crisis mode at that point in time.
It is. I'm not going to speak for the hospital, so someone from the hospital can address the task force specifically. What I do know is the hospital is not a designated facility, so it doesn't have a locked, padded facility. What I understand from a county point of view is that 5150 of the W&I code does not allow us to detain individuals. So it's all around this term detainment. Who can detain, who can't detain? Chief Vanderwall, who's here, may be able to speak to that more clearly than I can. But, and as I understand, the hospital doesn't have the ability to detain. That means you stay put, and I have the authority to make you stay put. That's what detainment means, in my estimation. So, what we do, or what we try to do, is make it so that an individual that's being examined for 5150 doesn't necessarily want to take off. We might do things like put them in a gown and store their clothes away. We will, on occasion, if there is someone that leaves or absconds from the hospital, immediately call law enforcement. So we will be on the horn to City PD to let them know, both hospital staff and behavioral health staff, that someone has left. Description, go try to find them and bring them back. That's what I know today. All right. So, what are we doing? No Place Like Home. No Place Like Home is an initiative that came about in June of 2016. No Place Like Home was signed into law by Governor Brown, and what it does is allocates or dedicates $2 billion to develop permanent supportive housing for persons who are in need of mental health services, are experiencing homelessness, chronic homelessness, or at risk of chronic homelessness. It's a brand new program, so brand new that in June of this year, there were technical assistance funding, grant funding available that the county did apply for. I don't even know that we have received an award letter yet, but it's $75,000. It's going to allow us to put together and prepare documents needed to meet threshold requirements for future No Place Like Home funding for permanent supportive housing, as well as planning, design, implementation of permanent supportive housing and accompanying supportive services. Now I say that because we all know how much funding it takes to build something, where we might be able to take some funding and apply a circumstance and work with landlords to provide housing as opposed to building housing. So this program is in its infancy, and we're waiting for more guidance to come out about No Place Like Home, but that is on the horizon. We expect that we're going to get a $500,000 non-competitive grant for Tuolumne County, non-competitive. Now $500,000 sounds like a lot of money, but if you're looking to build a 40-unit structure, a 20-unit structure, it doesn't go a long way. So we may be able to use that for match. I don't know yet. So more to come after we get our technical assistance grant funding and we start building our program. Okay. So recently, Behavioral Health participated in the Jamestown Business District Business Watch kickoff meetings and discussions. And a while back, a couple of months back, we had some issues in Jamestown, and this effort was led by Under Sheriff Bill Cooley, who brought together the business district of Jamestown to discuss homelessness issues and some of the how would you describe it? Some of the things that aren't necessarily desirable, non-desirable behaviors from certain individuals in Jamestown was discussed by these folks who are known individuals. They're homeless folks, they're transients, they're known to behavioral health. But in this instance, I believe we had a successful kickoff in this Business Watch program. And certainly if your task force would like more information about it, Under Sheriff Cooley has advised me that he'd be happy to discuss what they've done in Jamestown with anybody. So it's an effort just to be more watchful over the types of activities that are occurring in Jamestown regarding homelessness. So for example, if giving water or food to someone homeless is going to, for example, enable them to stick around to create and conduct in an undesirable circumstance behaviors that would possibly be detrimental to businesses or to individuals on the street in Jamestown or to folks that are visiting Jamestown, just to be paying attention to things like that and what types of services that behavioral health could engage in with law enforcement and do ride-alongs. We've done ride-alongs with the Sheriff's Office in Jamestown. We've engaged these, and it's only 5 or 6 folks. It's not the homeless population. You know, there's 4 or 5 individuals that are creating a circumstance that has elevated the anxiety in Jamestown, and we have ridden with law enforcement and the sheriff's office and engaged individuals in Jamestown, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. But there's a whole I won't say curriculum, but there's many series of implementation here regarding a business watch, and that's something that behavioral health has participated in to proactively try to engage our homeless population, at least in Jamestown. And Chief, we would be willing to support the city as well on an as-needed basis. If the chief calls us, we're more than willing to roll out with the police department to try and engage folks in services. The challenge is that they don't always want to engage in services. So that's kind of what we're doing.
I have a question on the No Place Like Home program. Do you see a role for the city to partner with the county in trying to develop some of these grants and services? I mean, it sounds like so far it's been a county thing.
Well, Councilman, if you're talking about blending and leveraging financial resources, I'll talk to anybody. So.
Any other questions? Look this way, so Jeanette.
I just had a question back to when you take them in and it's a crisis unit, and you take them to the hospital and put a gown on to try to hold them there. There used to be a 72-hour hold, and we had a place for that.
We
3rd floor, Motel 3.
Yes, we did.
We don't have that anymore, so what do we do now?
Okay, so good question. So we have a series of contracts, and we have a budget line item for hospitalizations, and we have a method of transporting folks that require a higher level of care than they can receive in Tuolumne County, and we execute it on a day-to-day basis. And the 72-hour hold is then we procure a placement, and we transport to that placement, and then their staff essentially take over all of the examination phases to determine whether or not they are gravely disabled or a danger to themselves.
We don't see that as something eventually we can get back in the county so they don't have to leave the county?
Not in the near future.
Money?
Absolutely.
So how many clients you would say a year?
That we hospitalize?
Yeah, that have to be taken up, transported out. Are we talking about 300? You said daily, so.
Yeah, so I have that information. It's in my binder. It'll take me a couple of seconds to grab it. I can grab it if you want to, if that's it, Ann can start. And then I can.
Concern.
Yeah, I like the answer, but we can go through and
Okay.
so you'll have to go back once.
Yeah,
How's that?
Just
Marianne.
on the same note, I feel that is a priority that we should also be working toward, is to have something similar to the ward that was at Tuolumne General, the 3rd floor. Do you feel like that's a priority, that we should have that up here in addition to the homelessness that we're trying to solve also?
Right, so the inpatient facility has been closed for a number of years now. I think we have made quality adjustments. I really do. I think we're managing our crisis unit. We work well with the hospital. We work well with our outside contracts for hospitalizations. So I would say right now, I don't know that I would recommend it right now. I really don't.
I have a question about No Place Like Home. Is there a timeline for, or is there a deadline that one has to initiate that program? Are there any dates?
Okay,
And,
so.
I mean, it seems like I know it's in its infancy, but is there a,
Right, so this technical assistance grant, the $75,000 that we applied for back in June, will allow us to most likely bring on board a contractor to develop planning for us that we don't currently have, that's going to allow us to be more marketable when we apply for larger grant funding. So that's kind of where that is right now.
but the initiative itself doesn't have a deadline, or, you know, that you must implement this at a certain point?
So it's rolling out, and we know that we're gonna get this $500,000 really non-competitive grant funding. We don't know necessarily when that's going to happen, or when the larger competitive pieces of the grant are going to roll out. Everyone that I talk to about No Place Like Home is essentially where we are. I think most likely every county did apply for funding to develop the plans that are needed to satisfy the grant requirements.
Thanks.
Okay. So I have one little dinky question and one little big one. One is, you mentioned homeless and transient. What are your kind of, how do you describe those? And then the other question is, as this area up here is growing with the elder population, do we have adjusted programs to fit elderly more so than the younger?
So let me take the transient versus homeless. Transient to me means mobile. That means they could be moving from a person could be moving from one location to another. Transient might be from Jamestown to Sonora, from Sonora to Jamestown. Homelessness to me means that a person doesn't have the resources to provide for housing necessarily, or for food, or for clothing. They don't have any other alternative but to be homeless. I don't know if that answers the question.
Sort of.
Okay. I'm not trying to dance around it. That's what
but
I
it
think.
puts a murky picture in my mind, that's all, because when you're homeless,
Well,
you can maybe still get food and clothing and that, but you don't have a place permanent home to cook it in or sleep in.
Sure.
But they may not be driving from Jamestown to Sonora all the time and moving camps or anything like that. It might be just a little different situation. That's why it's just a little murky to me.
So I guess I would respond that we know there's a myriad of services available for folks to get clothing, to possibly get a tent, food. We have showers, showering facilities that are available. We have laundry facilities that are available. So we have a myriad of services available for homeless folks. So what is it that, and how are you going to define someone who's homeless? Some of those folks want to live homeless. They don't want to engage in services. Other folks that want to engage in services, we're there to help them. And housing, I think all of us may know, may not know, that housing is a challenge, both from a finance point of view. Housing costs a lot here in this county, and our inventory of low to moderate income housing is very slim, very slim. So, your second question?
This is a growing area of elder population.
Oh, that's right. That's
and are we adjusting our programs or ramping up for some of those ongoing mental health, behavioral health type of programs for those probably going into crisis?
Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is yes. The majority of our caseload are adults. They're not children, and I say the majority are adults, both for treatment services and for medication services. I do have statistics on how many adults versus children we hospitalize. Hopefully I brought those. So I believe the answer is yes. We have a program that is fluid, that can take a look at where we're spending our resources and act accordingly.
So you adapt to whomever it is you're serving?
I would say absolutely. I mean, that's the way you would. That's the way I think, from an administration point of view, you got to look at your program. You know, what services are needed, and then act accordingly to find a way to provide the services. But in this case, if they meet medical eligibility standards and are on Medi-Cal or indigent, we're required to provide services.
James?
I'm going to meet with you in a week or two, so then I'll ask a lot more questions.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I'll bring that back to you. But one of the concerns that I think our people have is if they've gone to this crisis unit for an intake or whatever, it's weeks or even months before they actually, and that is a real, then they don't even bother to come. Why should they? They lose their, whatever, the momentum to go. You talk them into finally getting over there, but when they have to wait again, they're not going to go.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the question as well. There has been efforts by myself and other behavioral health staff to engage in ongoing dialogues with our managed care providers, both Anthem Blue Cross and California Health and Wellness. We want to make sure that when we have folks engaging us, and they may not meet our necessary eligibility standards, that they have someplace to go. And so we're working closely with both of those providers to ensure that's occurring. You mentioned something about delays in getting services once we've done an assessment. Psychiatric services have been a challenge for us. I'll just throw that out there. We had 2 longtime psychiatrists for many, many years. One retired last year. We have Dr. Peters, who still provides services at Behavioral Health on Mondays. And now we have a contract with Kingsview Corporation to provide telepsychiatry services for both adults and children. That has been a little bit of a challenge to kick off and provide the services that we would like to have, the robust services we would like to have for our folks here. I have my feelers out for other options that where we may be able to satisfy the really lack of psychiatric services. And I'll just say that it's a statewide issue, it's a national issue, but it's really impacting our region.
Can you characterize, is it a money thing? Is it a lack of skilled people to do it? What was the...
Both.
Yeah.
For us, both.
Yeah.
So it's the marketplace. And mind you, in county government, the psychiatrist classification is the highest paid classification. Yeah. And we have challenges recruiting for that classification. So I think also there is just lack of psychiatrists out there. I don't know that the med schools are seeing the numbers of folks that were interested in psychiatry in the past. So you have other options. You have telepsychiatry, where you go to them instead of them coming to you. We're also looking at possibly a psychiatric nurse practitioner model. Something new to me. I'm looking more into that. I don't know what that means into the future, because you still have to have a psychiatrist involved.
Sure.
You can't get away with it. You have to have someone prescribing the medicine for folks.
Right.
So that can't go back and forth like with another local county to share that position or anything like that, or just not working either?
I'm looking at any option I can find. I mean, if that's the option we can deploy, whether it's a contract option with someone who provides the service, or if a psychiatrist here in Tuolumne County is going to open up shop with 3 or 4 psych nurse practitioners, then I'll engage. we'll try to figure it out. But we know we're deficit, we know it's a resource issue, and we're trying to resolve it as we speak.
Any other questions for Steve on the behavioral health side of county services?
I just got a comment. You know, your position, behavioral health position, can be very tough. And you go back to history of kind of where and anybody can say the job is tough, but you've got to know not only respect the rights of the people that come to you, unlike 50, 60 to 150 years ago, you can't say, oh, something's wrong with them, we'll stick them in a home and they'll never see anybody ever again, which is what was going on. And that was going on until the early 90s in various forms in different states in the United States. So I applaud you because I hear the level of care that you have for that, you know, respecting constitutional rights, but wanting to keep everyone else safe. And at least it sounds like to me trying to get to the root of the issue.
Well, I appreciate that back. We take what we do very seriously. When you remove someone's rights, you better know what you're doing, because they do have a constitutional right not to be detained.
Well, it's interesting. I started doing a lot more reading probably several weeks before getting on this task force, you know, with mental health. And it's really eye-opening because it doesn't just go back to, you know, Ronald Reagan shut down everything, and then, you know, because that's what the first thing you hear. It goes back way before that and after, so it's really eye-opening.
It's fascinating, to say the least.
So with the employees that you have, I assume you have counselors and psychologists and that are working in behavioral health. So is it the lack of someone with the capacity to prescribe or manage medication? Is that or is it the psychiatrist more for the counseling part of it, or is it the medication part of it?
It's both.
Both.
It's both. It's building the case plan.
Okay.
It's both.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because I do know that with nurse practitioners now, they're trying to make it easier for a doctor in a different area to have like a set way he does medication. The nurse practitioner can do it on her own if she follows the guidelines and then just consults.
Right.
So, I don't know.
I couldn't agree more that there needs to be more research into this option, because all options should be on the table. They're really a real difficult commodity. I'm just going to say that.
Anything else?
All right, thanks.
I think before we open it to the public, I'd like to get Ann to do her part of it, because there might be questions that she could answer before we go to the public. So, Ann, if you'd like to go ahead.
Again, Ann Connolly, Tuolumne County Human Services Director, and just wanted to briefly state that for those in the audience who may not be aware, the Human Services Agency consists of 5 departments, and we have ambulance, public health, veterans, social services, and behavioral health. So while Steve has talked about behavioral health, and I'll be focusing on social services, we take every opportunity as an agency to integrate our services to make it easier for our clients to really seek out the assistance that they need. So I think that's one advantage of having an agency as opposed to 5 siloed departments, because we do see people who cross our thresholds in various departments and are in need of services. What I'm going to do just really, really briefly, because it's obviously been a while now for the task force talking about behavioral health, I do have some handouts that I'll have available for the task force and for audience members, although I did not bring enough. It's nice to see the interest. And certainly I'll have those available if they needed them. So I'm going to talk about specifically social services programs. And social services really consists of 2 divisions. We have a protective services division, and that's what people think about when they think of elders, dependent adults, children who are at risk of abuse or neglect. And we have an entire group of social workers, and various other workers who work with that group. But what I'm going to focus on today, because in order to meet that criteria, again, one has to be over 65, or if one is a dependent adult, they have to have significant impairments in a number of their activities of daily living, and then of course a child only has to be under 18. And we take that very seriously. But I'm going to focus on the public services side because those are our traditional eligibility programs that people think of. Some people call it welfare, we call it CalWorks. Some people call it food stamps, it's called CalFresh. And I'll kind of just give you a little flavor of that. So our CalFresh program is probably one of our biggest safety net programs, and that's of course food assistance for people who need it. And as an example, if one has no income, absolutely no income, the maximum amount of money that someone could receive is $192 a month. And I'm saying this in October 2017 because depending on the federal government, that amount could change, and it does change. We have distributed $8.4 million in fiscal year 16-17 for over 5,000 recipients. And 33% of those recipients are children, and about 25% are over the age of 60. So when you look at this as a safety net program, one can see that we have a significant number either over 60 or under the age of 18. Medi-Cal. Many people have an opinion about the Affordable Care Act. But what the Affordable Care Act did in January of 14 was to expand eligibility to Medi-Cal to non-disabled individuals. Prior to that, we had a program called County Medical Services Program because counties are responsible for providing medical services to indigents. And we used to have a caseload probably around 1,500 individuals. Since the advent of the Affordable Care Act, we had approximately 12,000 individuals on Medi-Cal in fiscal year 16-17, and again, about 36% of that number was children, and again, close to 25% were over the age of 60. So, truly safety net programs. General assistance is a program, it's a loan program for those individuals with literally no visible means of support, no relatives, no anyone else to be able to assist. That program has strict criteria, but it is a program that every county in California does run under the Welfare Institutions Code 17,000, and that program is available, although it has very limited usage. We have the Hope House, the Housing Opportunities Program for Emancipated Foster Youth, and Councilman Garaventa mentioned that. That was a program through social services, and it has a very specific target group. At the time the Hope House was implemented, it was for emancipated foster youth ages 18 to 23. And the point of it was to allow these youth to be in a home up to 24 months so that they could kind of really finish their process working through the foster care system. Since then, there's been a change. In 2012, we now have a program when the state of California implemented it where youth can stay in foster care to age 21. So now we have an extra 3 years where youth who typically obviously left foster care at 18 now can work with a social worker on a case plan, receive education, develop job skills, and really get assistance in that transition to true adulthood. So we have currently about 14 youth who are non-minor dependents on our caseload. So that's been a really significant change. Consequently, the average daily census at the Hope House has really dropped because the focus now is more 22, 23, and by that point, many of them are ready to move on into a more independent living setting. Those programs I just discussed were really for, again, individuals without children, but I wanted to talk briefly because I did have an opportunity to review just very briefly the point in time count because I did see it on my mother load today. So I did want to talk a little bit about homelessness with children. CalWorks, and some people call it welfare, but it is cash aid. And the focus of the CalWORKS program is to provide a safety net for children. One must have a child in order to get CalWORKS. I think sometimes people have that misconception that we're just giving people money and they can do anything they want with it, but the point of the money is to make sure that children are cared for. And in fiscal year 16-17, we issued about $2.95 million in CalWORKS benefits, cash aid, and it helped about 479 families. So if you do the math, you can see that the average CalWORKS grant was about $512. I would probably defy anyone in this room to be able to live on $512, find housing, be able to pay for all the other various activities, so it's a fairly small amount. It also includes what we call non-needy relatives, and this is what we have seen. Unfortunately, much of it's due to the opioid crisis. There are a variety of reasons, but we see children who are living with relatives who are not their biological parents. So right now in the county, we have about 159 what we call non-needy relative cases with about 278 children. So CalWORKS is also a safety net for them. Important to know, because I don't think people realize that. One thing we had done, and it was very coincidental, we ran a report as of September 27th, 2017, and Rebecca Espino, who's here in the audience, who is our Deputy Director for Eligibility, actually single-handedly did the report to verify its accuracy. And while the point in time talked about the number, I think it was somewhere around 151 who were identifying as Tuolumne County residents, children who were homeless. In the CalWORKS caseload, and again, people self-identify as homeless. Just so you know, we don't use a HUD definition when we talk about homelessness in social services. Literally, people come, they apply, we say, are you homeless? So it's self-identified by that recipient, and it's not required in all programs to identify whether one is homeless. CalFresh, we do that. Medi-Cal, we do not. But we had 86 children that in our computer database, and again, computers are only as good as the input that's placed into them, we're showing 86 were homeless on that date on September 27th. That's 86 too many, in my opinion, as an HSA director. But, so we're saying, well, what do we do about that? How are we going to help these kids? We have a few programs, the CalWORKS Homeless Assistance Program. This program's gone through various permutations over the years, and at one time, people were entitled to use it one time a year. Then it went to a lifetime with virtually no exemptions. Now it's back to one time a year, but these are for individuals who come in, they truly are in need of some assistance to at least get temporary housing, a shelter over their head. And last year we processed we approved 50 applications. About 56 people applied, so one can see it's a pretty, if one is applying, typically they're really in need of that. And then additionally, we have what we call the CalWORKS Housing Support Program. That was a program developed by the state back in 2013-14. We were the only small county to receive funding beginning in 2014. And the goal of that program is for eligible CalWORKS families. We only this year are getting about $199,000. I wish it were a lot more. But for those who, again, are at risk of eviction, are homeless, they can work with their CalWORKS worker to determine eligibility for that program. But it is for families, really important to note. But it's at least a start. It's something that the state has funded, and we do provide quarterly updates to the state on how many families we're assisting. And in fiscal year 16-17, we assisted 39 families, and to date, this fiscal year, we've assisted 15. I do want to recognize ACCA, because without ACCA, I know we wouldn't have received the grant to begin with. We contract with ACCA, and we have case management with ACCA, where both ACCA case managers and the social services case managers work together to really help these families work past the barriers that they have to keep, to really become self-sufficient. So I'm pleased to, report that partnership, and really, we couldn't do what we do without our partners. It's key to understand that while I have mandated programs, I can't survive without the community resources and also the individuals in the community who help individuals. Because as one can see, this isn't probably enough of a safety net for many. And then the last thing is our employment services or welfare to work, and again, it's for CalWorks clients. And what we do is really try to determine through a comprehensive assessment the barriers to becoming self-sufficient. And what we've seen, we implemented a tool a few years back that asks about what's your educational level, what have you been exposed to domestic violence, have you had legal issues, and it goes through a variety of fairly invasive questions, but we're fortunate that we have people who will respond to those. And we see what's been echoed, certainly by task force members. We see domestic violence. We see people with legal issues. We see people who want to work, but they just may not have the skill set. So they may need GEDs, or they may need some other type of assistance in order to really become gainfully employed. So that's important, because we know that without these skill sets, and people being unable to earn enough, funding to support one's family, the children are also going to suffer. We kind of looked at, we have like a little cheat sheet that we use about what it would take for like a mom and with one child to survive. And right now in this county, if you were really not relying on any of these programs, it's about $50,000 a year. When you look at the child care costs, and you look at the housing and the utilities, $25 an hour minimum. And I think most of us can look around and recognize that is a salary that's out of reach for many individuals. Consequently, a constant struggle. I wanted to talk briefly about a future initiative we have, and it's called the Housing Disability and Advocacy Program. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, it's a tiny little amount of money, but counties are encouraged to apply. It is not competitive, so we're submitting an application. And the focus will be on being able to provide some housing, very limited, some services for those individuals who are disabled, mentally and or physically. And they will work with the case manager to apply for SSI and various services. And the hope would be that at some point, and I hope it doesn't take 3 years, that they would be approved for SSI and then be able to have an ongoing income so that they could find permanent housing. I think in closing, I just want to say again and reiterate, we can't do what we do in human services without our partnering agencies, and I value each and every one of them. And I want to publicly thank every agency, staff person, and individual who in their own way gives and gives and gives to this population. Every day we see the pain and the suffering that these families have and these individuals have, and of course it's a natural reaction. We want to help people any way we can, and we all do it in our own ways. But the key is how we provide that we treat people respectfully and non-judgmentally, and we recognize we could be there one day. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Kathy?
And so in relation to homelessness specifically, other than all these programs, one of the problems we're finding, I know at Interfaith and some other places too, is that oftentimes they don't have ID to get them into the services or access services for them, not just a post office box, but an actual ID. And that's a constant problem, I know at Interfaith. And so how do people access these things, programs and services, without an actual ID when you are homeless and have no address? And you know that almost every day someone's wallets are stolen with all their ID in it. You know, that kind of thing. So I am in a dilemma personally with this for our agency, because a lot of times we know they're here, so we go on kind of a trust voucher I'll vouch for a Jeanette kind of situation. But I don't know, it's a dilemma for them because they can't get mail, they can't get jobs, they can't get paperwork back. Is there a location or a place where people can use an address that would satisfy stuff like that?
I think if it's all right with you, since this sounds very technical to me, I think I'll have Rebecca step up, since she is the eligibility guru, and talk briefly about that. Rebecca's,
Thank you.
You're right, Kathy, it's a great question, and yes, we have quite a few folks that have their wallet stolen or they're lost. For the CalFresh program, there's a variety of ways to demonstrate identification, and one is you just mentioned about, somebody vouching for somebody else. So if somebody brings a friend and says, yes, that is John Smith, and we believe, yes, that's John Smith, they sign a little document and we're good to go. And general delivery, Sonora, we use that all the time for mailing, and we will continue to use that.
And so that can relate then to a homeless person general delivery if
Yes.
they can pay for it.
general delivery, I believe, is free.
Is it free?
No
Okay,
charge.
well, that's good to know too. Thank you.
Any questions, any other questions for Ann?
I will say, you mentioned the idea of childcare. I'm one of those single moms, single dad. There are those of us out there that work really hard, but I'm very fortunate now that I've got older children that can pay for or that can watch, the younger. Childcare is brutal. I mean, to pay for it is brutal, and to find someone that you trust is that much harder. So there are people out there that are really struggling, and it's to pay childcare, plain and simple.
And I do want to say that, again, I wish there was something I could do, Councilman Hawkins, to help you, but for our CalWorks recipients who are engaged in welfare work, we will pay for childcare, and we will pay for transportation costs and a lot of ancillary services. So people develop a welfare work plan with their caseworker that includes those types of costs in it. So that's one way to assist people. But you're right, once there's no longer eligibility, it then becomes an issue of being able to earn enough in wages to be able to cover all those costs.
Yes.
So how does ISIS fit into that then, with that kind of?
We have a contract with ISIS, and they are the child care referral resource in the community, and we do contract with them, and they do handle all of our child care.
I don't know if everyone knows what ISIS stands
Oh,
for,
the
so.
Infant Child Enrichment Services, Infant Child Enrichment
I just want to make
Services.
sure everyone knows.
It's not the other.
Right,
Yeah.
and we do contract with them, and they do manage all of our child care costs and all of that for our welfare work plans.
Any other questions for Ann?
Again, thank you.
Oh,
So you were gonna give us a handout that has?
Yes,
Okay.
as soon as I go right back to my
Okay.
seat, I will pass it around. And as I said, I wish I had more, but I will be very happy, if, I can leave a contact and people, can get more if they want them. Or I can post it on our website, on social services.
Steve brought up brochures, I think.
I did.
Are those for,
They're for public consumption. They're brochures for all the programs in behavioral health, and there's 15 each. Obviously, we did bring enough, but I have more of those as well.
Okay. I guess we'll go to public comment, or Steve, did you have an answer to a couple of those questions you were talking about?
So, I don't have with me the numbers of hospitalizations, but I do have the daily numbers and the unduplicated numbers for visits both at the Enrichment Center and at Lambert Center for the first 3 months of this fiscal year. So for July, the Enrichment Center had an average daily usage, if you will. At the Enrichment Center was 37. At Lambert, it was 13. In August, it was 34. At Lambert, it was 16. At the Enrichment Center for September, it's 35. And at Lambert Center, 16. Now, those are average daily users. Average daily.
Daily users.
Daily users. You do the math, and the Lambert Center is open Monday through
Friday.
Friday.
11 to 4.
It adds up. We also have unduplicated numbers. And for the Enrichment Center for July, it was 167. For the Lambert Center, 134. In August, the Enrichment Center was 163. In Lambert, it was 139. And for September, the Enrichment Center was 172, and Lambert Center was 150. So they're used a lot. They're used a lot, no question. They provide a huge resource for those that they are there to support. I did bring, thank you.
I'll hand those out for you.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
Oh, and you said that you did not have a number for the...
I will get you those.
Well, we go ahead and see if there's any... Well, first of all, let's see how many people want to speak under the public comment portion of in reaction to... Okay, we don't need... So we'll go ahead and have public comment. So whoever wants to come up and make a statement or have a question or whatever.
Well, I can't speak for the hospital or the sheriff's department or anybody else, but I do have knowledge of some other things that I thought I would answer some of your questions. So for those who asked about the inpatient acute psych unit, you cannot have one that's not associated with an acute hospital. So you just can't have a freestanding inpatient psych unit because you need the emergency room associated with acute care hospital. But it seems to me that Adventist Health could pony up and do that, but they don't want to. Then there was the comment about the 72-hour hold and that we have contracts to procure placement and transport. I would disagree with that a little bit. We are able to procure placement. However, if you want transportation, it's my understanding, unless things have changed recently that the families haven't told me about, the families have to pony up $500 in cash for the transport, and Medi-Cal will not pay that. So if a family does not have cash to pay for the transport, then their family member is deprived of inpatient psychiatric care. And there was the thing about the crisis that you will go out and see anyone. However, if you have private insurance, you aren't eligible for anything beyond that. So for parents who have a family member or a child, or an adult child who has a mental health issue, you cannot get service in this county. So a lot of our county citizens go to Modesto to get care there. And then I know in Jamestown, from what I heard at one point from the sheriff, was that there were 3 members who approached them and were ready to change their life. And so they took them down and they were able to be seen. But then, as Jeanette said, they got appointments 2 weeks, 3 weeks out. And there were several people that were frustrated with that because here they are, they're ready for something, and then, oops, sorry, gotta wait. There was a question about the psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist usually is needed to make a diagnosis and then also to do prescriptions. And there has been some discussion, because there's an absence of psychiatrists, of once the psychiatrist has made the diagnosis, has prescribed the medications, they could forward that on to primary care physicians, who then could do the lab work to monitor and kind of work in conjunction with the psychiatrist so they could get renewals for their medication. My understanding is that the primary care doctors do not want this responsibility or liability in this community at this time. There was an effort, I don't know what this is, and I can't remember if it was the Tuolumne Miwok or if it was actually the county, that was looking into hiring some mental health nurse practititioners so they would be able to take over some of the functions that you talked about. And they do have the psychiatrists on telepsychiatry. And so from what I hear from the families and some of the patients, they're pretty happy with the telepsychiatry because there's a wide variety of doctors. And then at the enrichment center, a lot in the mental health, kind of the way they're kind of moving forward is they're doing a lot of peer counseling as opposed to strictly going to medication. So I would invite everyone here to go and visit the enrichment center. They'll be happy to give you tours. I found that probably Friday is a better day. So anyway, those are my comments, if that helps enlighten me in information. Thank you.
Hang on, Carol. Is any questions for Carol or anything?
Well, I'm no expert.
Well, but still.
Hi, you guys. I'm Chuck Keel, and I think this is a great thing that's happening right now. Everybody's really pitching in. We've got so many smart people working on this. I think we're gonna find some solutions. And I just want to make some comments. Listening to Steve Boyack, this 5150 issue is a big problem. Homelessness is a big problem. This is associated with homelessness. And I have experience with this 5150. And I've been through it many, many times. And recently I've been through it. I run a group home for seniors. And I'm not going to name names or anything, but one of my residents, he was going through crisis. And it was at night, it wasn't during the day. So we called the sheriff, said, this person needs to go to the hospital. He went to the hospital, but they sent him right back within, I don't know, less than an hour. And they kept doing that, and we said, what are you going to do about this? We were fearful for our own lives and the lives of our other residents. And this hospital was not willing or able to take care of it. That's a serious problem, Steve. So that's just one instance. Everybody has one here, everybody. How can you not detain somebody? That's a compliance problem. That's a state law. That if you have a complaint that somebody is mentally ill, mentally unstable enough that they're going to harm somebody, or even potentially, if you tell the police officer this is what's happening, and they say there's nothing we can do. So that's all tied up with this homeless issue. And there was something else. Last night there was a great meeting at ADCA. Love these guys. As far as this is a homeless issue right here. This is hopefully we can make a solution. We have vacant commercial property in this town. One building in particular is the old theater building. And I said, whoa, wouldn't this make a great homeless shelter? Get the people off the street, give them a place. These guys were talking about having one place to help, have everybody come in, all the services come in, feed them, house them, help them with behavioral health. And these guys are awesome, but their hands are tied. That I think the leadership in this town really needs to step up and fix this. But what about that building? Okay, the commercial owner of that building said, hell no, that's never going to happen because that's not what we do, okay? I can do what I want with my commercial building, yet it sits vacant for over 10 years. How long has that theater been vacant? And they let it go to pot. I mean, finally they painted it, but I think it had something to do with the hospital being built right across the street. And if I'm not mistaken, that hospital probably said, no way, no homeless shelter. So please, you guys, we need to do something. I am very passionate about this, and I don't yell. I talk loud. I'm a realtor. I'm a salesman. So if I offend somebody, if I talk too loud, that's what people do. They turn on you and they say, quit yelling at me. I'm not yelling. I am serious about this. We're not going away. This panel is not going away. These guys are not going away. We're just trying to do our jobs. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Hand Downtown Property Owner, and I just wanted to let you know that I had the privilege of serving on the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, working with the county for several years as a volunteer for them. And during that time, the psych ward on the 3rd floor of the hospital closed, the CAPE unit, the crisis unit, opened. Behavioral health was its own part, it became part of the Human Services Agency, and also during those years, the county had to cut the behavioral health budget by about 1/3. You can imagine what that would be like as an administrator. And I marveled at how well the staff worked, always keeping the client and the patient in mind, and how they made all those transitions so it was as seamless as it could be, especially with things closing and opening, and that the real focus was how do we make sure that services aren't dropped, and they had to make some difficult, hard decisions over that time. And as a volunteer board, Kathy served on that board with me, we advised them and got the inside scoop on what the finances were and how the hard decisions were being made and what they were up against, and sometimes some devastating decisions if there wasn't any other choice. But I just wanted to tell you how much I admire the staff on the county and the work they do in behavioral health, because they really do keep the individual, that person who they're serving, foremost in their mind, and they really work hard to make sure their needs are met. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on public comment? Okay. I'd like to give Steve or Ann, if there's anything you wanted to clarify. Oops, I just broke my pen. From a statement, because I saw someone made a statement that kind of questioning, so.
Yes, during my brief presentation, I mentioned that we respond to crisis. There's one element of behavioral health that is not strictly controlled by one's ability to pay or one's eligibility status for any other reason, and that's crisis response. We will respond to anyone in a crisis regardless of their insurance type. Whether they have insurance, whether they don't have insurance, whether they have Medi-Cal, Medicare, or third party, we will respond. Yes, ma'am.
From the drop-in center, from our volunteers, we hardly ever have to call, but there have been a couple of times, and when we do, the answer is, we don't have anybody we can send over. Well, what do you expect me to do? Well, you can call the police, which is what we've had to do. That's not what I'm looking for, and I'm hoping that after you and I talk, that we can work out something different, because I know there's many times when we really needed a worker to come. You can't bring them over there, they don't want to go, and we need someone that would just come over. So I'm hoping that we can work that out.
I do too. We will work it out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So that's the presentation. We can, I guess we'll just go ahead to, let's see, yeah, we'll just go ahead to number 2, continued discussion of homeless issues and provide direction to staff. One thing that I would like to, at least at this time, since Tamara is here, at least give her the opportunity to briefly talk about PITCAN, if no one objects to that. Knowing that Raj had planned to have a full presentation at our next meeting. So I don't know if you want to.
Sure. Many of you probably saw it in the paper today. We were able to get over 50 volunteers. We had the Sheriff's Department, probation, several others. Again, I'll kind of segue on what Ann said. It takes a lot of partners to get this kind of stuff done. In January, we do a point-in-time count based on our Housing and Urban Development funding, and we counted 198 people. This particular count, some of the criteria is different because HUD has a different, like Ann mentioned too, HUD has a different definition of homelessness. They don't consider a couch surfer homeless, but we did use couch surfers in our account, and our count was 711. That's a remarkable difference. It made a huge difference because of the families, or the volunteers involved, and an incentive that we were able to offer because of the Sonora Area Foundation gave us a grant. And we're in the what next conversation at this point. Where do we go from here? So thank you for, I think I got my signals crossed with Rod. I apologize.
That's okay. Is there any question for Tamara at this point? You do?
Usually.
Okay.
And I think we talked earlier about this, and that was, if there's a way to sort out the city homeless to the county, ones out in the county area, the outlying areas,
Sure.
and ones that are pretty much within the city limits. Just out of matter of curiosity for future kind of looking at different programs or different strategies,
Right.
if you will.
Sure, it was a question. We used the HUD sheet as far as what our questions were. We did not ask people where they were camping. I don't know, in my limited experience, that might have been the one question that could have been a tipping point.
I didn't mean specifically where their camps were. just
Right, but if they were in city
outside
limits or
city
outside the
inside
county, right, and we did not capture that data. And could have, it wasn't requested of us at the time, but it's a good point.
Next time.
That, exactly. Hopefully there won't be a next time. We're gonna be one of those few people that solve the homeless problem.
No, I hope it was next time, to see if there's any breakdowns out there.
That's true,
Yeah.
that's true. So, anyway, thank you very much.
At our last meeting, for those of you that weren't here, we talked, at this point of the agenda was mainly for, if I recall correctly, it was mainly for the opportunity for homeless folks to come and talk about their particular experience.
The agenda was to invite the county to come and make a presentation. There were other members of the committee that were going to share their service information. I think Janet had some handouts. So we want to have that opportunity, and that it was to invite anybody that wanted to share their homeless experience tonight. So we've got a little bit of time left, trying to get these to around 2 hours or more.
Exactly.
So you might want to see if there's other service provider information.
Okay. Yeah, we can do it that way. So if there's any other service providers that want to speak out about what they do, and if possible.
Well, I brought mine, but Steve brought them and passed them out too. So you
Okay.
have ours, so that you know that.
Did you have anything to add about the electric or services you provide?
Most people don't understand what we do provide. They don't even know we exist, so that's kind of interesting. But it's a socialization place for people to come where it's cool in the summer and warm in the wintertime, and there's always food. And we try to be the resource that helps them go to the resources. And many times if there's more than one person on staff, which we don't have a lot of, I've got more volunteers now, thank you God. But we can invite them over and we'll take them over to try to get them an ID or take them to social service. So we kind of do that just on our own, volunteers. And they always can have a place to eat and watch television, use the computers, and just try to be, I guess I would say, a resource, because we're kind of the first line that the homeless come to try to show what. But they, and I think behavioral health, that young lady that said they do a great job, I know they do, but our people don't want to go to behavioral health, so I want to bring behavioral health to the drop-in center. I think we'll do a better job with the homeless if we do get somebody there once or twice a week that they can meet with. Because we can't get them to go over there. I'll drive you over, I'll give you a ride over. Well, maybe later, not now, maybe tomorrow. Maybe. So I just think I'm going to meet with Steve and I think we can do a lot better together. So.
How many volunteers do you have?
Right now, I have up to 18. That's fabulous. I've just gotten several couples in the last few weeks.
So you have 2 or 3 at a time, or how does that work?
And sometimes you're down to one. One of my volunteers is here tonight. And sometimes they can't come because they're volunteers.
Yeah.
And then you're down to one person. But sometimes we have 2, and we can have 3 because we like to see what's going on outside and what's going on in the kitchen and what's going on in the main room. So
Does the volunteer have usually serve a day a week or a certain hours?
usually it's one day a week, although we have some now that are splitting the shift, come on half day and the other one takes the other. That works too. Sometimes I have somebody that come now, they're going on vacation, they'll be gone. So it's kind of flexible, but
Okay.
if you can't, I'll fill in, and that's what I do. So,
Colleen?
I have 2 questions. So you're open Monday through Friday, 11 to 4. And doesn't a church, doesn't a church come in and provide services?
at the last Saturday of the month, the church comes and feeds them a meal, because they're running out of food stamps and out of money. So they do have that. Plus, our county is wonderful about supporting us. We get food from all different places, from churches, from Elks Club, from people who had a party, and they give us the leftovers. And so don't tell them how we do very well, and you're well fed there. And pizzas every single day from Little Caesars. So they can get fed, and nobody in this town has to go hungry. That's one of the things I think we do well. We can feed them. We can't house them, but we can feed them. And we don't always meet their mental health needs. That's what I would say. Housing and mental health are huge for the homeless.
Last night, I don't know if it was you because I couldn't see, but a woman spoke about a van with portable showers.
That would be GSAC, Hazel Mitchell. And that will be, she said she'll be ready in January. And they will be bringing it to the drop-in center and to 2 different places. And we're going to...
I think she said Jamestown and Tuolumne or?
Yeah, it's going to be 3 different places.
So it's the land-based center as well?
Yes,
Okay.
2 days a week.
Lovely. That's good. Okay.
Any other questions for Jen?
I visited, it's very nice, clean, and
Have you
looks
been
like a
there?
friendly place.
Good.
Yeah.
I would invite anyone to come and
Yeah, it was
visit. I
warm
think
and
it's a nice
inviting.
place.
I thought.
Nice and clean. I've had the sheriff and the police department from Oakdale come up and visit and were so impressed. They said, "Ooh, it smells good in here." I don't know what they thought was going to be there, but they said it smells good in there. But our people clean. We clean it every day ourselves. And the maintenance department from the county says it's the cleanest building in town. So I like to take credit for my people helping out, keeping it clean. So come and visit us.
Kathy, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm the Director of Interfaith Community Social Services located out on Tuolumne Road. Our basic premise is to serve the struggling, low and no-income families with basic living items, food, clothing, toiletries, legal services, haircuts, showers, all those basic things that people, and we encourage them not to spend their money on those things, use the community resources, and then save whatever little money they have to pay the things like their rent or their gasoline for their cars, things like that. And we hook them up as much as we can with as many community services or other agencies that are better or more expert at what they are needing. And so ours is basically kind of a generic service. And we have 150 volunteers, probably 15 to 25 a day. They rotate, so there's, some work once a week, as Jeanette was saying, some once a month, whatever they can do is fine. We have 2 paid staff, myself half-time and my assistant half-time, no benefits or anything like that. And we rely completely on community donations. The only thing that we buy for our services is the food, because we want to make sure that that is of quality and we are not serving cast-offs of any kind to our clients. Other than that, all of the food, all of the clothing, the haircuts, the legal services, all of that is donated by volunteers who have been in those services or who can provide that service. So that's it in a nutshell. We serve probably close to 600 unduplicated families each month. And we provide probably close to actually 2,500 individuals that come in there, children. Some families are big, some aren't. We do have a homeless population, but it's not just the downtown in the encampment homeless. We serve a variety of others who have cars, who have a place to stay but have to move now and then. We have folks like that, so it's, that's why I'm asking some of these questions about the general delivery and things like that, because it's a dilemma for them to get some kind of services on occasion when they don't have ID. We try to recommend them to seek social services as much as we can to at least find out how they can help first with the variety of services that they have. And then from there, we often do get the same complaint that Jeanette has of sometimes when we call in an urgent issue, we don't get responses really fast with some of the different agencies, and so we're kind of working on that. The other issue is we have a consortia, not just interfaith, but an open wide public. Whoever would like to come to a social service agency's informational sharing time once a quarter. And we have probably 40 to 60 actual agencies that come to these meetings and share updated information, what's going on. It's at the St. Matthew Lutheran Church on Joshua Way. The next one is November 8th. If anybody's interested, you're more than welcome to come. And we hope that information goes back out to the community or the people that need it. So from there, yes, 9:30. 9:30. On the button.
That's 9:30 in the morning.
9:30.
Yes, 11:30. Ends generally at 11:30 on the button.
And question I would have is, do you do everything there on Stryker Court, or do you do anything off-site?
No, we do everything on Stryker Court, and all services, I don't think I mentioned that, are free to our clients. There's not one thing that they have to pay for or donate to get services or pray to get services because it's called interfaith, anything like that. So,
do they have to meet requirements?
the only requirement we have is that they can show us proof that they live in Tuolumne County. And we try to make that as a residential street address rather than a P.O. box. Because we know people come and have different places. There are a number of occasions on a daily basis where people don't have ID, but a lot of times we can vouch for them, we can call for them, we can verify it by phone, by whatever we have to do in order to get them the service. If they don't have the ID that day, we can still do food only. And then they can come any other time they want to with some kind of a verification.
Any other questions for Kathy? I don't think either of us have a program. Do you have a program? No, not really.
Might be buying a bar.
Colette, do you have any? Okay.
No, I'm at the College Foundation,
Right. I didn't know if there was anything you were articulating with. Is there anyone else that has a community?
No, I have a community thing.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I've observed one incident downtown where the police were called and the person was apparently, I assume, on drugs. And the police handled it beautifully. I have to give great credit for that. But I don't know if we're prepared tonight, but could we ask what kind of training the police have for dealing with people who are either on drugs or have mental illness?
We'll bring that presentation as a different meeting, and then subsequent meetings. So. Lane, did you have something?
Hi, I'm Lane Willie, and I just wanted to say that I'm one of the volunteers for you. And it is one of the best places you can volunteer. Everybody is treated with respect. And I'm just here to say that sometimes I forget that I'm the volunteer there. It's just that kind of a place. And sometimes there are people that we're wondering, do we have to call? It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there are. And usually whoever's in charge is able to kind of work it out and redirect them. And so nothing happens. There's always food. many of us who are volunteers bring food, and I just can't thank you enough, Jeanette, for what you're providing, because it really does make a difference to so many people.
And we always thank you for your help, too.
I know, but it really does make a difference. Thank you.
Now, is there anyone in the audience that has an organization that they provide services that want to? Okay. Back under number 2, still, this is probably the best opportunity then, if there's anyone in the homeless community that would like to speak on any problem or their experience rather. Don't see anyone.
Jim?
Yes.
I've asked a couple of them, and they said they would be to do it tonight, but I asked them if they would come and share it. And
I have a feeling we're going to keep this item on our agenda for at least a couple of minutes.
Until they're ready.
So, yeah, exactly.
And I'd like to have especially 1 or 2 to come who have been homeless and now are out, so you can see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, is there anyone that has, well, we've talked about a bunch of issues that we probably haven't had fully public comment on, so is there any, this is your opportunity for the second item, any public comment on the continued discussion of homeless issues before we start talking about Pat? Come on. And then we'll talk about what we're going to have on our next agenda.
So my question is, are you looking at creating a shelter? I mean, I don't think you've gotten that far. I think you just had one meeting. I wonder about, the 2 things I wonder about is empty buildings that could be a shelter, like Tuolumne General. It's not empty, but has a lot of rooms that aren't being used, and bathrooms. And affordable housing. And I know the city can do something about that. I mean, there's that wonderful lot at, I don't know the name of the street, that runs between Stewart and Washington, where they tore down those old houses. I mean, if they could build an affordable apartments there, people could walk to town, they could walk to Safe Point, walk to Grocery Outlet, they could get a bus somewhere, walking distance, people without cars. Anyway, there's a lot that could be done. And I don't know where, I just want to, I guess, push toward solutions. The problem
I would say that right now we're just kind of in the fact-finding portion because we're just starting.
Right.
Tonight was education about what services are out there, talking about the pit count, the next one, among other things. So we're getting to some,
right.
It's not going to be.
I didn't see the paper today yet,
okay.
But I heard 700 and some in the count. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. It's a huge number of people. I don't know what percentage that is of our population, but anyway, something needs to be done. And I'd like to see a county-wide effort. I'm glad the city is doing this, but it needs to be a county-wide effort too.
I will say that the county's definitely involved in a lot of things. I mean, Sherry Brennan, supervisor for First District, is heavily involved in getting the funding for the pit count that gave us a more accurate, thing, and more accurate scope of the problem. And Sherry and Randy Handel were at the pit count presentation last night, and I've personally talked with both of them, and they're both on the homeless issue. So I mean, it's the county's involved. I guess that we kind of. The city kind of took it upon themselves since there was the issue of downtown.
Right,
to kind of take the lead and get going with something. But I don't think it's not going to be in the back end. The county's.
Right. No, I'm very glad you're doing this. It's really a really good start. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other?
All right, I have one more thing to say. That's a huge number, 711, plus 30%. Payaka, maybe not quite that much, but that's 1,000 people. And how many people are in this county? 50,000. That's 1 in 50. 1 in 50, you guys. That is unacceptable. Last night, there was a serious discussion. And Randy Handelt has got his phone and he's texting. That is not okay. That is not paying attention to Joe Q. Public. Sorry, Jim.
That's
not, I know.
This is where time.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to get it kind of pissed off. Everybody's so nice here. We're so nice in this county. Everybody gives. And that's right on. But you know what? We need solutions. And I've heard for 10 years, since Sherry Brennan got on the board, she's done zero. And yeah, I ran against her, but that was one of my issues, man. And she's done zero. Now all of a sudden the merchants are saying, hey, you guys need to do something. And you guys have to do it because you're front and center. You're in Sonora. Now the county's going to have to do something, and they sure as heck better.
Okay, so just one comment I would share with the audience and the task force. The city did provide funding to develop 7 affordable housing units on Stewart Street, a project that's been recently constructed and finished and is now fully occupied. I replaced a building that had burned down at that location, but it was through block grant funds, and it's dedicated to as affordable housing units. And I don't know exactly what category or what ranges of income that fit in there, but that is one project that we did do and fund. As far as topics for the next meeting, I will talk to the chief about coming and talking about his officers' training and skills of dealing with mental health and social service issues. And we do have a presentation for the count, and it will be an opportunity for to talk about what active services are as well. And then hopefully we can have some homeless experiences shared with the board. So in terms of how this is evolving, you are in your kind of this learning stage, finding out what's available. The next level is trying to focus on what the needs are, and then once you identify what those needs are, and then prioritize them, then we look at what solutions might be available. So, and I would just offer the comment that the affordable housing issue is a huge issue, almost separate in and of itself, but it's a magnitude that's a real challenge, but it is a need. So anyway, I would craft the agenda items with those 3 major topics and then have the opportunity for other continued discussion. So.
Oh, sorry, as usual. So when we heard about this task force and we applied, one of the issues that became apparent was that the downtown merchants were having issues with the misbehaviors of the homeless. What I understood it to be the primary kickoff for things that were going on. I am very personally curious as to know the absolute constituency, if you will, of the people who are homeless that create these problems, or is it just folks that are creating these problems and it looks like it's the homeless population? Because my understanding, the homeless are pretty well tucked in bed by night.
They're usually in by dark.
And so I'm just curious, what's the reality of the issue here?
I feel as a merchant that we've kind of defined now, or semi-defined, the difference between a transient and someone who's homeless. Where someone who's homeless wants a home, they need to find the resources, which a lot of these I didn't realize exist. When people come with problems, now I know it's great to know what is out there. And I feel like the public, if I don't know, and I'm at work downtown every day, a lot of people must not know. And so a lot of people don't even get the help they should. But then there's the transient issue is almost like the people that are being addressed by law enforcement. And my feeling as a merchant was, because my parents lived downtown, where the transients were doing drugs in the creek at the bottom across from Save Mart, and there were fires happening in the summer. And my parents don't worry in the winter when it's wet, but in the summer, being elderly and just in the regions around Sonora, worrying about these guys that are kind of doing riffraff in the woods. So, but then there were some merchants, I guess, that were complaining about, they were calling them homeless. So I think this has opened up a can of worms that we're going to be helping the people that need the help, but there has to be some law and order for people who are camping where it's going to endanger our citizens and themselves, you know, if a fire were to erupt, and the pollution in the creeks and the garbage and things like that. That I'm not saying are people that are going to your facility or to behavioral health. It's a different, you know, group of people that need to be addressed in a different way.
But also some of ours use drugs and can cause some of these, so we need to educate them too, as to be part of this community.
Yes.
We need the homeless to be involved in this. How do we work together for this?
Yes, for sure.
Which is better for them too then.
Yes, for everyone.
So I would like to see that stigma clarified a bit,
Yes.
because I think that's where a lot of it is going. For not the people that are servers of these folks, but the ones that are out there that just kind of opinions, because they see it in the paper, they hear other people talking, and that's the label, is the homeless, that encompasses everyone.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit of definition that we could do anyway as a task force in that whole education of the culture of this grouping of people. And let's build our community in understanding, and maybe there would be some better behavior, or better actions, or something we can do to limit that stuff.
And some of that real negative talk, I just don't even listen to it. You know? It's
Yeah,
like
it's
you
out
have to
there.
look at it in a realistic way rather than listen to what you see on social media.
So your next meeting, if you follow the schedule that you started with, will be on the 9th. That's the second Thursday. The second Thursday of the month. And it would be, again, we set it at 5:30 like you decided is your meeting time.
That's fine with everyone?